another episode of El Pueblo Unido. Hi, everyone. I'm Marifer Vizcaino. I am one of the co-hosts for this amazing show, and I'll let everyone else introduce themselves. Guys, ladies, you want to start, Salma?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Salma Vizcaino. Yes, relation to Marifer Vizcaino. And I am your new co-host for the podcast. This is my first one, so hopefully
Woohoo!
that goes well. Woo, 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 woo.
And I'm Anna. You guys know me, I think, at this point. I work with the leadership department, and today I'm joined. I don't know if you guys can see the little ear on the camera, but I am joined by my dog. He wanted to be a part of today's podcast.
Oh,
The cutest guest.
He wanted to
Very
welcome
much.
Marifer. Welcome Marifer. He wanted to say goodbye to Marifer. And say hello to Salma. So why do I say that? Because I am losing my other leadership department co-worker. Marifer is unfortunately leaving me. Not to make it about me, but she is leaving me. I was told not to cry, but it's hard not to. But she is leaving GALEO, which means this is her last podcast. And I'll let Marifer say her goodbyes, but I just want to, thank her for her time at GALEO. I know everybody is really saddened to see her leave. She did amazing work for GALEO, but, as mentioned, this is also Salma's first podcast, so as we lose a Vizcaino sister, we gain another one.
Well, thank you, Anna. And I'm sure, well, for those of you who don't know me, I just want to let you guys know that I am not going anywhere. I'm going to be very much intertwined in the GALEO cinematic universe through the GALEO Leadership Council. And my goal is to remain as active as I can as a volunteer and as a member and a GIO alumni. So, yes, I am departing my professional role as the program manager and moving on to a different organization. I'm still very committed to the organization and to all of you. And I will miss everyone here. I'll miss not only the staff, the programming, but the volunteers and everything we do. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me yap. But I leave it in the leadership department, very capable hands with Anna. And you guys have an amazing little me through Salma.
No, when you said I'm not going anywhere, I was like, wait, are you not leaving? Sorry. This is live, guys. Sorry.
And then to me, what got me, I'll miss everyone. It's like, well, she can't miss me. So we have a lot of guests. Our main guest is named Murtaza Khwaja, and he is the executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. And we have a few other guests that you guys will find out about later. But really great conversations, and looking forward to having them on.
Yes. Well, stick around. We have an amazing podcast ahead of us, and El Pueblo Unido will be right back.
Bienvenidos a Lo que nos importa. So today we'll be talking a little bit about planned events by our leadership department, o sea, Marifer y Ana. But we'll also be focusing a little bit about the redistricting that is in danger of happening soon in Georgia.
Yes. So Anna and I are excited to announce that we are launching our Ponte las Pilas Summit on August 29th in Lawrenceville, the Junior Achievement Center. what does that mean? That means we are looking for facilitators. If you are interested in having a session at our summit, let us know. We have a form ready for you guys to fill out, and then we'll reach out to you to see what can we do. And then also we have our ticket sales for the summit out and open. So if you don't want to facilitate, but you want to participate, learn, engage, win something, that is the best way to join us on August 29th.
I love that rhymed. Facilitate or participate. Like a poet.
Well planned.
Did I do that?
Yes. And
Not me saying, oh, yeah, that was planned. And you said,
oh, no, that's scripted.
On the leadership department side, as Marifer mentioned, we have our GALEO Leadership Council, which is a volunteer board made up of GIL alumni, and we are currently in the planning stages of our alumni mixer, which is the best way for alumni to reconvene, get to catch up in a fun environment. And this year we're having it on July 23rd. Our flyer and tickets and everything and more information will be going out soon, but just for now, save the date, July 23rd, and we would love to see you there.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, sorry, did you want to go on?
No, please.
Okay. As the theme of today is coalition work, reaching across different communities and working together to fight the oppressive nature of some parties or actors in the state. And unfortunately, after the Calais decision, we've seen that many states, exclusively southern states, are quickly mobilizing to redistrict, especially mid-decade redistricting. So our governor has called a special session starting June 17th to create new maps for our state, which, as we know, have traditionally dissolved the political powers of Black communities in the South, and by extension, minority communities. As GALEO does, we will be advocating and fighting against anything that is hurtful or harmful to our communities, and working alongside those who also fight for our community. So stay tuned. We'll provide updates through our social media, through our newsletters on what's going on regarding that session.
That's right.
Yeah. So we'll talk more with our guests about that, but just want to keep you guys posted. But that is lo que nos importa. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we are joined with a very special guest. We are joined by Murtaza Khwaja. So please welcome him and join us in welcoming him as well. Murtaza, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Thank you all, Salma, Marifer, and Anna, for having me. Murtaza Khwaja. I serve as the Executive Director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta. I have been a resident of Atlanta and in Georgia since '93. I moved here with my family when I was just 2 years old. So I've been in Atlanta a long time. I went here for undergrad at Emory University and law school at Georgia State College of Law. I was previously a civil rights attorney with the Council on American Islamic Relations before serving as their executive director, and now have the privilege of serving as executive director at Advancing Justice Atlanta. Really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, there's a lot to dive. You mentioned this, but could you dive a little bit deeper into your background on civil rights and legal defense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated law school in 2016. And during that time, as many of you remember, that was during the presidential election. And what we saw emanating from that campaign was a lot of xenophobia, Islamophobia, and anti-Black discrimination. That permeated from those campaigns into our state legislatures, where we saw a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies and potential legislation start popping up at an alarming rate. And coming out of law school, I had a really great opportunity to join the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is the nation's largest Muslim civil rights group, and work for their Georgia chapter, doing direct legal defense of people who had been victims of religious discrimination in any part of civil society, as well as being a lobbyist at the state level, where I got to work with incredible partners across the state, including GALEO, Advancing Justice Atlanta, the SPLC, the ACLU, and saw in action something that I'd seen in Georgia growing up, which is not just being the birthplace of the civil rights movement here in this U.S., but continuing to be that incubator of civil rights in the country, and that being really cross-racial and intersectional in the approach, recognizing that all our communities are being impacted by white supremacy and by racism and misogyny. And for us to be able to overcome that, we have to work together. And so I saw that in action during my time at CARE Georgia when I first started out of law school. Also saw it in the legal cases we took on as well. For those who may not be familiar, the Muslim community is incredibly diverse. And so it's made up of Black individuals, of immigrants, including Black immigrants, but also API immigrants. And there's several Caucasian Muslims as well. So it's a very diverse community. And the fastest growing demographic actually of Muslims in America is actually the Latine population. So it is an incredibly diverse community. And I got to work with all of them on all those communities in the legal cases we took on at CARE, and felt very fortunate to do that. In addition to that, we did litigation on a lot of civil rights issues, particularly around free speech and demonstration, ensuring that for people to have an inclusive democracy, it's not just about having your voice heard on the ballot and advocating for it. It's also having your voice protected in your demonstrations and in your protest. That work happened at CARE, particularly around foreign policy, and then also anti-immigrant policies, and heightened in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter movement, and continues on with our work at Advancing Justice, where we've stood up for the rights for student protesters and demonstrators over the last several years. The last thing I'll add, as the background to that, is the immigrant direct legal services that we do at Advancing Justice, and how that is also really important to the civil rights work that we as an organization do. Detention in this country and carceral solutions in this country have put so many people behind bars, particularly Black communities and other communities of color. And that's done at a disproportionate rate, and it's done intentionally because these systems were not built for us. And so us pushing back against immigration detention and this militarized enforcement we've seen really post 9/11 and this national security mechanism that we've seen erupt is really important for our organization in advocating and furthering the rights for all and civil rights for all Georgians and Americans.
Thanks for that.
So much. Yeah, thank you so much for your background, and also the education portion of what you just talked about. You are the executive director of the Asian American Advancing Justice here in Atlanta. Can you talk about what you do at your organization, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Advancing Justice Asian Americans Advancing Justice was actually the first legal and policy advocacy group in the South that's focused specifically on API and MEMSA communities. But we also recognize that immigrant communities are bigger than just the API and MEMSA. API and MEMSA are also not a monolith in themselves, and that we also have to work in solidarity with Black communities. So our mission is really about advancing justice in a broad multiracial coalition to advance the rights and build power in API, MEMSA, and immigrant communities. My role specifically, I am very fortunate to work with an incredible team. So I oversee the C-suite of our team, and then we also have our programmatic directors that report to our deputy executive director. And very fortunate every day to get to support the work that our incredible team is doing, from our civic engagement organizing, where they're doing voter registration, mobilization, and education, as well as issue-based organizing, to our policy advocacy, where they're working on lobbying at the state level, at the local level, and also at the national levels for immigrant rights and also for access to the ballot. For our direct legal services, that does pro bono legal services across the immigration sphere, everything from affirmative pathways to citizenship to deportation defense. And then last but not least, our litigation department that is looking to challenge discriminatory policies and laws in immigration conditions, immigration detention, immigration writ large, and then also access to the ballot. So my job and my role is really a supportive role for all of these functions, and being able to talk about the great work that they do to the community, to our partners, and help continue to build the partnerships that our team on the ground is doing.
Thank you. And as the program manager for leadership, I want to shout out Anthony Pacheco, who was a GIO alum and who's also part of your team.
Yeah.
I would like to know more about the ways the Asian American Pacific Islander community is being affected by restrictive voting laws and other legislations that are, broadly affecting all of us. But how is it specifically affecting the people you serve?
For sure. To answer, I'm going to go a few years back and start maybe in the 2010s when we had the Shelby v. Holder decision. That was one of the first bricks that stripped away provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And in it, it took away a lot of the supervisory power that the federal government had on southern states. And so what we saw, Georgia was really ground zero of this, is southern states using a lot of different types of legislation and policies that diluted particular communities of power. A lot of times those were Black communities, but other communities of colors were also impacted. And here in Georgia, we saw every single method of voter suppression be used by then Secretary of State Kemp, who's now our governor. And one of those, two of those I'll focus on. One was exact match, which was saying that your name had to exactly match, and a signature match at one point that was proposed as well. There are other provisions too that I'll briefly talk about, which were relating to people's addresses and whether or not they were active voters and what being an active voter meant. But the short of it is that communities of color have been disenfranchised in a lot of different ways. And so their participation in civil society by voting is generally, the numbers there have historically been lower because of those barriers to entry. So that has been a reason, and there have been transitionary as well, and have moved around a lot from place to place depending on the immigrant community. Specifically the APIs are not monoliths, so people have very different experiences within that, but broadly at a disproportionate rate, the API community face the impacts of that. The other one is around name matches, and so this idea of othering, where names, API names might be very different than American names. People might have a different way of going about whether you put your last name first or your middle name at a different point. And so on documents, your names may read differently. And so that also impacted at a disproportionate rate API communities over others. And so when we filed litigation around a lot of these and were successful, it was by showing this disproportionate impact on API communities. However, now with the GALEO decision, we've seen another further disintegration of the Voting Rights Act and protections that communities of color, particularly Black communities, but communities of color have had. And so we anticipate a couple of things in this coming up special session, which would disproportionately impact the API community. One, Gwinnett County has been a particular focus of this administration, Governor Kemp's administration, also our federal administration. Both Fulton County, Gwinnett, DeKalb have also been areas of focus. Those are also areas where APIs make up a larger electorate share than they do in other areas. And so if there's going to be dilution of communities and of color and their vote share, it's likely going to happen in those counties in a way that dilutes it. We have not seen the proposed maps here in Georgia yet, so it's uncertain yet what will be. But if they follow the model that's happened in other states, that's generally what we can expect. The other is Georgia has, in 2023, we had the second largest API caucus at our state legislature, which means we had more API electeds there than any other state other than Hawaii. Subsequently, that number has come down. But this year, we have more APIs on the ballot than any other year and are expected to retake that number 2 spot. A lot of those representatives are in the metro area. And again, the metro area is going to be targeted. And so there's a chance for that those representatives and electeds to also be districted out or redistricted out of their particular districts. All of that to say is that both the electorate share, so the number of APIs that have that make up a voting block and how their vote is counted, is looking to be diluted. And then secondly, having representation, and it's very important to say representation for the sake of representation isn't what we're after. We're after candidates and policies that are more reflective of our communities. And sometimes that comes from having a reflective, having electeds that come from those communities. So seeing that number go down potentially, or those districts be merged, is also going to be a concerning thing that we're watching.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so no, we know the theme, at least so far for this conversation, has been definitely that a lot of migrant communities and people of color have been severely affected by this administration since it came into office. So any other ways that Asian American community has seen or felt any repercussions from us, specifically in Georgia, other like repercussions that we haven't mentioned already?
The big things around immigration. So their immigration enforcement has been particularly militarized against this administration. But to be clear, immigration enforcement has continued to be militarized since post 9/11 policies around like this idea of a national security apparatus, the creation of ICE, and the coalescing of a lot of different federal agencies into this Department of Homeland Security has created a carceral approach to immigration, which previously was not the case. And that's only increased from administration to administration. And so what we're seeing right now, this militarized enforcement, is impacting all immigrant communities, but also just all Georgians, because immigrants make up the communities of Georgia, whether it's in our healthcare systems and having doctors and nurses from API communities, or immigrant, or in our grocers, or in restaurants that people frequent, or in our schools. These are all immigrants are part of Georgia's ecosystem. And so this militarized enforcement has impacted all of them, because now rather than people being seen as part of a community, they're seen as an other. And there's this xenophobic rhetoric that has shown up in people's actions. So we saw the largest ICE raid in history happen in Savannah and Elabel, where both Korean and Latine workers were targeted. And it wasn't one group that was targeted more than another. They were both targeted and taken to Folkestone in detention. We can continue to see APIs be underrepresented in access to translators or language access in detention conditions. Detention should not exist for any form of immigration. Let's be clear on that. And while it exists, there definitely needs to be language access there. So conditions, when we're talking about improving conditions, is not to say that detention should exist. It's just to say that while it's there, people should have access to clean water, to translators, to language access materials, also to attorneys and all of those things. So API communities at a disproportionate rate are being impacted by not having access to particular in-language resources here, while as detention is growing. And as enforcement is also picking up, these communities are living in a place of not, to be frank, in fear. They're living in fear of what's going to happen to them or a loved one. We've had several base building meetings or meetings with communities where we've asked our community members to, if you or someone you know is traveling with a passport, or traveling with a license, or traveling with papers or some form of identification that you didn't previously know, raise your hand. And everyone raises their hand, because there's nothing stopping current enforcement from stopping any type of immigrant. Now, whether or not they have ability to do something after that is different, right? Like citizens enjoy certain protections, but in the moment they don't. We are seeing citizens being impacted by ICE enforcement as well. We're seeing other people who would otherwise have long-term status being impacted. Doesn't mean that there's not remedy potentially afterwards, but it does create this environment of fear where everyone is worried about, because I look different than what this administration thinks an American looks like, I might be targeted or a loved one might be targeted. And so I think that's had very real impacts on how API communities have been able to live here in Georgia, and how they show up in different spaces, whether that's in the workplace, whether at schools, or even at the ballot.
All right.
As mentioned before, last month was API month. And, within everything that we've been talking about, what did it mean and feel to celebrate API month while also struggling with the community being persecuted through anti-immigration policies?
Yeah. It's very tough, I think, to find the place of celebration amidst real impact to communities. And what I lean on is that it's not anything new. Communities have lived and have been impacted by really discriminatory policies or really discriminatory actions or even violence, and have still found time and ability to find joy and celebration, whether individualized or in community. And that's incredibly important. That's a huge facet of resistance. Many in the immigrant space and many in the API space come from countries that have been touched by American foreign policy or economic sanctions that, of course, have forced displacement of those people. And so we have seen in real time the impact of what military intervention or economic sanctions do. And many of those have come here to build a life, not because they wanted to, but because they had to, and have been met with some level of suspicion coming here, whether in policy or in rhetoric. And so the ability to come together and celebrate the art and food that has become part of the American fabric as well, and that has become part of the homes that they've created here, is a huge form of resistance and advancement. And it was really special to be able to do that in Piedmont Park for a couple of reasons. Atlanta, the South, Georgia, has been a place where we've seen erasure of indigenous communities. So this was a place where Muskogee and Creek Indians lived. This was also a place where Black people were enslaved and owned. And there was also a place, Piedmont Park specifically, where Black people were segregated and weren't allowed to enter. And so to reclaim that park and that area and that land as one for community and celebrating all those diversities that made the city and made the culture of Atlanta what it is was really special. And I think centering that message, not glossing over the impacts that our communities continue to face and the history that we've come from, but being able to find joy and celebrate and show the type of home that we want to create for all, I think was really important.
You guys did the Southeast at Piedmont Park, right?
Yeah, so we had our Southeast event, which was a celebration of art and food, and we did at Piedmont Park, at Park Tavern. Yeah.
It's always a good time. Murtaza, you spoke a lot about the commonalities, I think, that the Latino community, or the Latinx community faces, as well as the API community, going from the intervention of the United States in our home countries, maybe even differences in how we write our names, abbreviations even. And I think there's a lot of things that ties our communities. What do you believe? There's the discriminatory, the maybe bad differences, but what else do you think ties our communities together and allow us to work together in this coalition space?
I think there's a huge idea in not just, I'll say people at the end of the day are drawn towards community, and communities of color in particular, because we've lived in a world that's been shaped by white supremacy, have been able to show up in community, whether that's family and familial ties that are more than just your immediate, right? Your extended family, your cousins, or in the community that you're building in your neighborhood, which is also very important. And the community that you build together amidst challenges. That idea of community is shared, and this idea of building a world that is not for the individual but for the group, this idea of collectivism is, I think, one that also brings our communities together and is a natural connector. Even in the language and the way we talk, there's shared words or shared ideas that are built on understanding and seeing the world from a lens of community versus a lens of a group versus a lens of an individual. And so I think those are also really things that resonate with all of our communities. The other thing is distrust of this world that has been shaped by white supremacy. And so we've seen people, and this is where I say, like, representation's sake for the representation is not it, or representation for representation's sake is not what we're after, because we've seen so many times people that are from the countries we are come to power in those countries and be the oppressor, or be the extractor of those communities that they themselves are a part of. And whether it's in the API space or the Latinx space, we've seen that. We've seen dictatorships, we've seen military supported by the United States, we've seen undemocratic institutions really extract power and extract capital from people rather than building within a country. And both our groups have seen the impacts of that. And so I think when those things are coupled together, this idea of collectivism and shared struggle and shared community really speaks volumes. The others, I mean, there's so much shared around food. I think that's a really hard thing to decouple from. Sitting around the table, sharing food, being able to be hospitable and take care of others and take care of each other is a huge part of our experiences and our culture, our cultures, and bring us together as well. And it happens to be really great food too. So
agreed.
That's true.
Wait, what's your favorite Latino food? Gotta ask.
Oh, this is
sorry, my dog. This is live. Sorry.
Yeah. So caldo de res when it's cold. I love a caldo de res when it's cold. Outside. So like a hot caldo de res when it's cold outside. I love pupusas, especially like when it's like a mixed one. So like pollo, loroco, jalapeno, and like arroz all together, and then queso too with it. Love that. Actually, we ordered that for lunch today, so that's also on.
It's fresh on your mind.
Yeah. And then one of my best friends in undergrad introduced me to maduros. So maduros with a crispy edge with a char is also phenomenal. And I would be remiss. My favorite cake in the entire world is a tres leches. So
so you get down.
Yeah.
I'm getting hungry. I brought it on myself for asking that question, but now I'm really, really hungry. So I'm gonna divert from the food conversation before I get hungrier. Our communities are resilient, and I think that has been the main theme in this conversation. How do the communities that you serve at AAJ find joy during difficult times?
I think it's in a variety of ways, and it goes back to immigrants are people, and so what brings, I think, the human experience alive are things where you're able to engage with the world around you, whether that's in people or whether that's in art or in culture. So people leaning into their families and time with their family, I think, is really special and really important. We at the office, we have, people's kids come to the office, and it's part of the community that we have here. And I think it's really important that in the midst of doing the really tough work and having really tough and heavy conversations, being reminded of those ties that make us human and that make us a community is really important. So I think our communities do a similar thing. I think our communities also have come from a lot. People, the struggles they're going through here are not necessarily too different than the struggles that many have come from. And so I think that they have had a history of being able to be resilient, and in that resilience, building a life for themselves, and that life that enriches themselves with their families and with those things that celebrate the human spirit. So I see that with the AAPI community as well, with other communities as well.
Yeah, it's definitely, we have to find those little sparks of happiness or light in the darkness that we're seeing. But I'm glad we ended on that little bit more of a positive and lighter note. But for our listeners who'd like to learn more about AAAJ and the amazing advocacy work that you do, can you tell them where to find you?
Absolutely. We're on Instagram, so please follow us on Instagram. You can also, it'll have a link to our website where we have a lot about our org, our impact reports, our policy work, a lot of the reports that we've done about the different areas of work. And you can sign up for a newsletter. And do the same also for GALEO as well. GALEO is one of our closest partners, and we work in strong partnership and collaboration. Both of us get to work with a lot of great organizations around the state, and you'll hear that in all the ways that we talk about our work. So please do follow us on socials as well if you get the chance.
Definitely. Well, thanks for that. And thank you again so much for joining us. We learned so much and feel at least just a little bit of glimmer of hope that we're all kind of in this together. And like you mentioned, looking forward to doing more coalition work with AAAJ and GALEO. And again, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, y'all, for having me. I appreciate it.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seguimos con el Pueblo Unido. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Ponte las Pilas. Today we have a special guest, Eric Rangel, who is a GALEO alum from the class of 2021, which we all know is the best cohort. You know it, I know it, he knows it. And he is also the executive director and health navigator at Latino Link. Welcome, Eric. Do you want to introduce yourself a little further? Maybe explain what Latino Link does and how it serves the Latino community.
Yes, of course. Thanks for the introduction. And I agree with you. I think 2021 was the best class despite the Rona challenges we were having at that time. I swear memories from those times are very pixelated at this point. So yes, as I said, I'm the executive director and health navigator at Latino Link. Latino Link is a nonprofit organization that's been around since 2015. I joined around, I want to say 2020, 2021, around there as well. It was during the Rona time, so it was a bit weird. I'm adjusting and all.
Yes.
But nonetheless, Latino Link has been an organization that has been advocating and highlighting the LGBT Latinx community here in Georgia. Essentially, our role has been, getting a seat at the table, right? Especially where there are decisions being made on behalf of our community, and even within our own group, right? Of Latinos, sometimes we feel like we're being left out, and so this is a kind of our way of taking part of all that. Aside from that, our biggest focus is on addressing the HIV rates in the state of Georgia. So we have a health navigator program in which we provide free health screenings. So we focus on HIV and syphilis. Georgia right now has one of the highest, if not the highest, newly diagnosed rates of HIV in the state, especially among the Latino community. And so we work hard to address that by offering free testing, whether it be at the Mexican consulate, thanks to our partners at LCF, or whether we'll go to a nightclub, or we'll go to a health fair, we'll go to local pharmacies, we'll go to like Walgreens, and we'll set up testing tents there. We partner a lot with the local clinics as well to help provide the services. And so, yeah, and we help folks gain access to PrEP and to PEP, which are vital medications that help prevent HIV transmission, but also the transmissions of other STIs. But aside from that, we also do a lot of medical research with Emory University School of Medicine, where we focus mostly on HIV research and within the context with the Latinx community. And so we try to understand, what's going on, why are rates going up, what can we do to address those barriers? And so that's when we collaborate with other organizations to address those needs. And so, yeah, and so that's been us. And so it's been interesting. It's been great. And then it's been a great learning experience that I think that GIO helped me prepare for, because leadership is one of those things that's very malleable. And so I think GIO for me really set the tone for me, like for the future.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing everything about your organization. I knew you guys were advocates. I knew you guys were doing a lot of work, but I had no idea the scope and the educational background to what motivates your services. And then this month, June, is Pride Month. I know for every other state, not in Atlanta, but or Georgia, but we're going with June is generally recognized as Pride Month here. So how does your organization celebrate the experiences of the LGBTQ plus community, especially Latinos, while addressing those challenges
Yeah.
that they face?
So, I mean, like I said, like in a little intro, highlighting the community, essentially giving folks the opportunity to show up, right? And because when you think of like the Pride Month, you usually think it within a kind of like a this very singular context, right? It's, you know, white male dominated and this and the other. So our best way to do that is to highlight folks in our community, but also to highlight the community and create a space where folks from all backgrounds can come together and celebrate this month, that really exists to highlight our that we are here, and to also show the trials and tribulations that we had to go through, from the civil rights movement to present days, because a lot of the rights that me as a gay brown man that I get to enjoy are built from, you know, the civil rights movements and the history, right? And so I am in depth to our history, for, you know, the opportunities that we have, and yeah.
And you touched on leadership, especially learning from GIL and having that leadership professional development experience. Do you believe, or are there any barriers in the LGBT Latino community that they specifically face when seeking leadership opportunities? And how can organizations, even like GALEO or corporate America, help remove those barriers?
Yeah. So I think it was interesting, right? Honestly, a way that you know, organizations, nonprofits across the board can what can they do to help make it more accessible, right? Or how can we invite more folks? Really, it comes down to, you know, creating like groups or creating opportunities, or not. If there's an opportunity, you know, kind of essentially sign them up, right? But I think also it's addressing more from a cultural context and self-beliefs, and addressing biases and also stigma. So there's still a lot of stigma that we deal with. I mean, not just like in the HIV context, but also even as an LGBT context. I think what we're seeing now, specifically during this administration, is that they have been vandalizing the LGBT community, the usage of pronouns and stuff like that. And so, you know, all of that's essentially rotting brains and is creating this, you know, this whole false image of what we are, right? And so that in a sense is creating a stigma and is creating a negative view on us that I think that in the long term, it's going to have its effect, if not already. I know that some corporations, some organizations, they have their DEI initiatives, which are helpful, because those essentially help create pathways to better opportunities and more leadership roles. But I think that those in leadership also need to be more, you know, open-minded, if you will. But also, I think folks in leadership need to also address their own biases, right, and their stigmas, because it's essentially that and those beliefs that are preventing, you know, somebody perhaps from my community from ascending to, you know, higher roles.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking like in the way in my GALEO hat, where I think that it could also transcend into other aspects. One of the questions I wanted to ask specifically was about voting and civic engagement. How does civic engagement change when people feel that all parts of their identity are welcomed and valued?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be honest with you, with Latino Link, we're wanting to make that like shift, right? And to wanting to be more involved in civic engagement work, but we've been a little bit too caught up on on addressing this health, you know, issue. But I think one thing that we tell folks is that, you know, it's their like it's the right to vote, like if you don't vote, then you can't complain, and if you really want to make change, then go out and vote, and because that's how you're part of this whole you become essentially part of history, right? One thing that I tell folks is that, like, I think it was de Courteville who once said that one of the great things about he called the United States a great experiment, right? Because every election cycle, we essentially get to choose what our future generation looks like, right? And so how you take form of that? Well, by showing up and voting, knocking on doors, telling folks, to go out there and vote, to, participate in the process, right? And I think especially now more than ever, I think some folks might be feeling a bit, not motivated to show up because they're asking themselves, well, what's the point? And so that's when I was like, leadership, like, no, there is the point. You have to go up and show up and vote, right? Because a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, at least from like a healthcare context, right? From Latino Link, a lot of the issues that we're dealing with is because at the foundation of it is because of who we have those in power, and who we have voted in power. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. And we saw what happens when we don't vote or maybe made a mistake and voted for something that was harmful to our community. So to your point, that experiment, going back and maybe investing in different ways to change how people vote and see that that it affects their daily lives as well.
Yeah, because you interact with government every single day. You wake up in the morning, turn the lights on, you interact with government. You go to the sink to brush your teeth, you interact with government. You drive on that road, you interact with government. So you're interacting with government every single day, right? So those pots that you see in the road, well, you gotta vote to get those fixed.
Exactly. So hopefully that motivates some of our listeners too to go out to vote. And there's a runoff elections. There's a general election in November. So think about yourself and others, especially in different communities, and how your vote affects the decision-making process for them as well. I wanted to close out with 2 more questions. As we continue to celebrate Pride Month all throughout June, what message would you like Latino leaders and community members to carry forward as we come together to fight for common outcomes?
Yeah, well, understand that the Latinx community is not a monolith, and that we have, we still have our own stigmas and biases within our community. And so essentially what I like, the message for like leaders and community overall is that, like, in order for us to progress to that next level for the betterment of our community, is to addressing within our internally, right? And addressing within stuff within ourselves. But also keep, collaborating with other nonprofits. We're all different in our own little way. Sure, Latino Link, we're a Latinx organization, just like you guys are, but we focus more from a healthcare perspective. And you guys take on the role of being more civically engaged, right? And which is really important because a lot of what we have to deal with essentially at the foundation of it's civic engagement, turning out and voting. And so I think overall, the message for community and community members is to further strain our relationships, collaboration, show up for one another, address our issues internally, and just understand that, well, we're not perfect, right? We're humans. And so I think it's just a matter of, addressing that and just being realistic about things.
Absolutely. Thank you for that message. As we close off the Ponte las Pilas segment, I'm pretty sure there's many listeners or viewers who are like, I've never heard of Latino Link. I want to know more. I want to connect with maybe you or somebody on your team. How can our viewers or listeners learn more about Latino Link and learn more about your services?
Yeah, of course. So I usually point folks to our Instagram page. So it's literally just Latino Link. Or if not, you can go to our website at latinolink.org, and you can learn more about like what we do, find out when our next testing events will be, our screening events. If you're a medical student, or if you're a pre-med or a nursing student or a PA student, anything in healthcare, and you're wanting to get more involved and see what it's like to provide healthcare services beyond a clinic setting, this is a perfect opportunity. Like I said, we do collaborate a lot with Emory University School of Medicine and also other local clinics. So it kind of lays the pathway to that. And right now, we're going to be relaunching our Health Navigator program because we're partnering up with the clinic, and it's going to expand our services and streamline access to PrEP and other vital like primary care services. So if folks want to volunteer and get involved, talk to community, the points about healthcare and the like, then just reach out.
That sounds like a great opportunity also for maybe our GIO members who are looking for volunteer hours. See if they can connect with you for those missed sessions. Thank you so much, Eric. Again, he is a member of our 2021 GIO cohort, the executive director and health navigator for Latino Link. I hope to see you on July 23rd at our alumni mixer here in Chambly. So we've been advertising it. We just rolled it out for all of our alumni listening. That's a great opportunity to connect with past and present alumni and GIO members. But thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with El Pueblo Unido.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hola, seguimos con Latinos en Acción y estamos con Elisa.
Hola, ¿cómo estás, Salma?
Muy bien, ¿y usted cómo está, Elisa?
Bien, gracias. Thank you for chatting with me today.
Definitely. Happy to be here, always.
Well, I know we've got a lot going on in Georgia. People just went out to vote recently, but it looks like we have some more elections coming up. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah, of course. So this is true. We did just have elections. However, because some of the candidates didn't receive more than 50% of the vote, that means we automatically go into a runoff. So that is what our runoff election is, and that's what's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks. So that is our runoffs, and those are going to be on June 16th.
Okay, wow, that's coming up really soon. So how long do people have to vote? Because when you say that the election day is June 16th, that means that's the last day to vote, right?
That is correct. Yes, that is coming up very quickly, but do not fret. There is early voting, just like with other elections. However, this period will be a little bit shorter. Early voting does start on June 8th, and that'll run until June 12th. But yes, June 16th is election day, and that will be your last opportunity to go out to vote. And remember, if you are voting early, that means you're able to cast your ballot at any location in your county that you're registered in. And if you wait until election day, that does mean you have to go vote at your specific voting precinct. And if you're not sure where that is, you can always go to mvp.sos.ga.gov.
Thank you for that information. I know that in the past I've been surprised when I've gone to a place where I voted before, like a library that always had early voting, and then found it wasn't open anymore, or that my polling location had changed, and it's so frustrating. So now what I do is I check in advance to make sure that I'm not wasting a trip somewhere else. So thank you for that information.
Of course.
Another
That's
question,
definitely the
Salma.
easiest way. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. You're good. Another question, Salma. So how do I know who's running in this runoff election? Because the last ballots that we just had were so long. Are there a lot of races? Or are there just a few that I have to research this time?
Yeah, so there definitely are going to be less, but you do have to pick, similarly to the general election or the primary election that just passed, you do have to pick whether you want a Republican, Democratic ballot. So both of these ballots will have candidates on the running, but it will be significantly smaller than previously because, again, not everyone has to go into the runoff. Some people actually did get that 50% or higher. So if you do want to look at your sample ballot, again, that is the same website as before that you can check that out at, which is mvp.sos.ga.gov. And that's going to be a super great resource for everyone to see, again, those precincts and see your sample ballot. And from there, you can definitely do some more research.
Thank you for that information again. Is there anything else that you want to tell people about voting in these runoffs? Any other important information that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, well, there is a common misconception, or a lot of people maybe just don't know, that if you voted in the general, the primary, you do have to vote again in this runoff. It's just, it doesn't go towards that one. So please make sure to go again and make your voice heard, because now you'll be voting for just between many fewer people.
Okay, so you mean like, so there's maybe you can pick from two people in this runoff, and maybe I already voted for one of them, but it doesn't count in this election. Like if I really want that person to be, say, Secretary of State or something like that, then and they're in a runoff, then I need to come back and vote for them, or it's like I didn't vote for them at all. Okay.
Yes, please go ahead and show up for the candidate that you want. You do have to go vote again. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Well, I will do that. I will go on the website, and I know we're going to show that on our screen, make sure people have that, but I'm going to double check to make sure I know what's on my ballot, and I'm going to go early to vote so that I avoid any lines and problems on the last day to vote, which is June 16th.
That is the ideal and perfect plan. Voting early makes your life 10 times easier.
Okay, Salma, thank you again. Is there any last thought that you want to share with folks who are watching?
Yes, you're welcome, of course. And I do want to remind everyone that the site I've been mentioning is on a QR code on screen. So if you've scanned that, that'll give you your polling location, hours, and that sample ballot. So make sure to go on there and keep yourself informed.
All right.
And that was, yeah, and that's Latinos en Acción, and we'll be right back.
And we are back with La Pinche Politica. We have a special guest who is at this point what do we call it? Recurring character in our podcast, Kyle Gomez Weber. Thank you so much for joining us again to talk about a very important topic.
Yes, no, it's always a pleasure.
So for those that may not know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Kyle Gomez Lineweber, Policy Director for Common Cause Georgia. We are the state team for a national, nonpartisan grassroots organization, and we're dedicated to protecting voting rights, ensuring fair representation, and pushing for more accountability when it comes to public officials and government transparency. I'm from Georgia. My dad's a Mexican immigrant. And of course, I used to work for GALEO as the Director of Policy and Advocacy. So it's always a pleasure to be back with you.
Yes. And you also used to be a co-host of the podcast before you abandoned us.
Yes. I know. We still haven't moved past that trauma.
No, you're a great asset to the team, and we were very sad to have you leave. But we are thankful that you still respond to our call to discuss very important topics like the one we are going to discuss today, which is the upcoming redistricting special session here in Georgia. I am very excited to discuss it because I, like many of our audience probably are, not very familiar with the topic, but as we've talked in past episodes, it's very important for us to be aware of what this is. So could you talk a little bit about this, what the special session is about and how it could affect communities here in Georgia?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. When we left legislative session in April, there was, I think a lot of people expected that we would be going into a special session, but not about redistricting necessarily, because, one of the issues that the special session that the legislators are supposed to be addressing is, a few years back, the legislature passed HB 189, which, among other things, set a deadline for the entire state to transition away from QR code printed ballots to hand-marked paper ballots. And while they set that deadline for July of this year, there were no funds appropriated to make that transition happen. And it might sound like a really simple fix. Oh, you just need a different type of ballot, but really you need different paper, you need different printers, you need different ballot scanners, and your poll workers need a different type of training, right? And because there were no funds appropriated for that transition to happen, and for election administrators to buy the new materials and new equipment that they need and conduct the new trainings that they need to do, our state, we are not ready to make that transition happen. And so we at Commonwealth Georgia during the past legislative session were pushing for funds to be appropriated, and for the deadline to be pushed to 2027, or really ideally 2028. And unfortunately, the legislature did not address that issue by the time legislative session ended. And so we knew we were going to be coming into a special session. What changed, and what we did not necessarily, what wasn't certain, was that the Supreme Court issued a decision in Louisiana v. Calais, which essentially really gutted the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and has made it much more difficult for states to, draw maps intentionally to ensure, more equal, fair representation of their state's population, of the communities that exist within their state. And it's also made it much more difficult for citizens, voters, organizations to litigate when maps are discriminatory. So right now, essentially what the Calais decision said is that legislators can draw racist maps as long as they're not intentionally racist. We at Common Cause, and I'm sure at GALEO, which of course GALEO in the past has been a part of litigation, pushing for fair representation in our maps, right? And what we say is it shouldn't matter what the intent is. What should matter is the impact. If the impact is racist, that's what should count. And that's why we have a Voting Rights Act. And that's why Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act exists, I should say. And so now the task is much more challenging. It's much more difficult, but Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act still exists. So there are still protections. It's just harder to enforce those protections in a lot of ways. But because of that, because of the QR code issue, because of the Calais decision, Governor Kemp issued a proclamation calling for the legislature to come back into a special session, and that's really how we got here. And since then, the governor has added a few other items related to property taxes, the gas tax, as well as filling some appointments for nominations to different offices, like judicial appointments. So this special session is going to actually cover a bit more ground than we initially thought. But I know orgs like Common Cause Georgia, and I'm sure GALEO, we're going to be working together to do everything we can to protect, the principles of the right to vote, of fair representation for all Georgians.
Thank you for that explanation. And obviously, platforms like this are important because the public needs to be informed about, like, I think one of the biggest things is to be educated about a topic, because you can't talk about a topic or advocate forward or against something if you're not informed of it. So I think that's why these conversations are important. And so to recap and make sure that I understood correctly, so the special session is going to tackle different topics, including the changing the QR code ballots and the redistricting portion, right?
Right, and that's exactly right, because the governor's proclamation, specifically references the Calais decision, the Louisiana v. Calais decision, and says, the legislature needs to come back and redraw state Senate, state House, and congressional district maps. So everything's on the table, and that's why it's really important, because we're talking about our community's ability to to elect the candidate of their choice for state House, state Senate, and the United States Congress. So, there is a lot at stake when it comes to this special session.
And when is the special session? When does it
So
start?
yeah, so it starts June 17th, and so very soon. We're not entirely sure exactly how long it will last. It can last up to 40 days, or it can end earlier than that if the legislature addresses all of the issues laid out in the governor's proclamation.
Okay. Okay. And so, what are the best policy solutions for ensuring the right to vote and to fair representation, that to protect all Georgians?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and we've worked with coalition partners as well as legislators this past session to put forward the Henry McNeil Voting Rights Act. Georgia needs a state voting rights act because the issue is now that the Supreme Court at the federal level has really weakened the Voting Rights Act through a series of decisions over decades at this point, from Shelby v. Holder to most recently Louisiana v. Calais. We are now it is important that at the state level that we do everything we can to protect folks' right to vote. And that's why we need a state voting rights act, because the Calais decision does nothing it doesn't limit a state's ability to pass or enforce or implement a state voting rights act. And with Louisiana v. Calais, and really again back to Shelby v. Holder, which ended the principle of pre-clearance, which was when the Voting Rights Act was passed. Southern states with the long history of discriminating against Black voters and intimidating Black voters and suppressing their ability and their right to vote. Those states had to essentially get federal approval for any changes that they made to election administration, election law, things like that. Shelby v. Holder ended that. And then now Calais has made, the concept of fair representation and our ability to ensure that and fight for that much more difficult. A state voting rights act would restore those principles, would restore those protections here in Georgia. And we've seen states voting rights acts pass in a number of other states as well, and they work. And that's why we need one here in Georgia. And another thing I would highlight too is the concept of an independent redistricting commission. We need an independent redistricting commission in the state of Georgia so that districts are drawn in a way that is fair, in a way that includes the people of Georgia in the process and keeps communities whole, right? Because, we talk about redistricting, but really what we're talking about is gerrymandering, right? And we already have gerrymandered maps in the state of Georgia, maps that crack and pack communities. What does that mean, right? And cracking a community essentially, and we've seen it done plenty of times, especially throughout history to Black communities here in Georgia, where communities are. Portions of one community are split into different congressional districts or different legislative districts, so they have less power, and that their collective power is weakened and diluted. Or we've seen communities packed, where where one community or members of one community are pushed into one single congressional district. And so that their power is limited to just one district rather than potentially two or three. And so that's what gerrymandering is diluting the voice of a community. And that can be, again, we've seen it time and time again happen to the Black community, but it's also relevant to the Latino community, right? We've seen, look, Georgia has been through several rounds of redistricting just in the last few years. And there's a reason when in every round of redistricting, Gwinnett County, just as one example, has been cut in so many different ways and split into so many different districts. It's because there are so many Latino and AAPI voters in Gwinnett County that legislators or the people in power they want to dilute the voices of the Latino community, of the AAPI community, and so they've have split our community in Gwinnett County into different congressional districts, so the Latino community can't really vote with one voice and elect a candidate of their choice to represent, them and their values and their interests. And this has a really real impact on our day-to-day lives, right? Because it's easy to just think about this as being, oh, this is just politics, this is just lines on a map. But when you can't vote, when your community can't vote and advocate with a singular whole voice, that means your hospital in rural Georgia might very well close, right? That means that public transit that you need might never come to your community. That means when you want to keep families together in your community, you might not have someone actually advocate, an official advocating for you and your family at the state or congressional level. So an independent redistricting commission draws maps in a way that actually makes sense, that preserves communities or communities of interest as they're known, and draws maps in a way that's nonpartisan, and also protects racial and ethnic minorities, because right now what we're seeing and what we're probably going to see this special session are going to be even more attempts to hurt Black voters as well as Latino voters and AAPI voters.
Wow. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, like I am right now, are very concerned. So what can the average person do if this is the case?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because we've presented a lot of problems. We've presented a couple policy solutions, but it's important to know. It's important, I think, one, for our community, especially the Latino community, for our community members to think of themselves as thought leaders, as policy leaders, and as advocates, right? And you have as a constituent, you have so much power when it comes to putting pressure on your state senator, on your state representative. And that's why it's so important for them to hear from you, to know you don't want our already rigged maps to be even more gerrymandered. And so that's why, we at Kamikaze Georgia, we already have a letter campaign, an active letter campaign. We've had more than 20,000 actions taken just in the last couple of weeks, with letters being sent and calls being made to Speaker John Burns, the Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, as well as individuals, state senators, and state representatives. At this point, with those 20,000 actions, every legislator in both the state Senate and state House have received at least one letter from Kamikaze Georgia supporter, member. And what these letters say is, we don't want rigged maps. We're watching you, and we want you to vote no on any maps that further dilute the voices of Black voters, as well as Latino and AAPI voters. Another action that I think folks can take and get plugged into is that on June 22nd, Kamikaze Georgia, along with partners like GALEO, are going to be hosting an advocacy day, People Over Maps Day, on June 22nd at the Capitol, where we're going to talk to our community members about what the special session is, talking a lot about what we've been talking about, right? What redistricting means, how is going to impact you, how it can hurt you, why it's relevant. And more importantly, we're going to help train up folks. It doesn't matter if you've never been to the Gold Dome, if you've never been to the Capitol before. We're going to train you up, help you learn how to advocate for yourself, talk to a legislator, and push them and make your voice heard. And then once you're trained up, we're going to actually go hit the ropes. We're going to go into legislators' offices and tell them we don't want any more rigged maps. We want maps that are made for us, by us, and preserve our communities, keep us whole, and ultimately will serve our interests, not the special interests, not the interests of DC, of political machines, but the interests of the people of Georgia, of nuestra comunidad, of Latinos in Georgia, because that's what we deserve, and that's our right. And so that's what we're going to be pushing for, and that's why we hope we can get as many people as possible to come join us on June 22nd, or really any other day, a special session. But June 22nd, People Over Maps Day, it's going to be a really special time, and we're so glad we get to partner with folks like GALEO and making it happen.
We are very excited to partner with you guys. And I do have one follow-up question and a thought. I like that, yes, voting is very important, but it's not the only way to have your voice heard. You don't have to wait until one day of the year to make your voice heard. So I appreciate all the different ways that people can continue to be active in the community. And so the other question I had was about People Over Maps Day. You mentioned the date. What time and how can people need to sign up beforehand, or can they just make it there on the day of? How can people get more involved with this event?
Absolutely. So we have a mobilized link that we're sharing with folks, and so I'm sure, hopefully, we'll be able to, on this post, throw it on the screen or put it in the comments, so folks can access it easily. And then, of course, go onto commoncause.ga on our Instagram page, and you can go into our bio and follow the link there and register. We're going to be there from in the morning, about 10 a.m. in the morning into the afternoon. We'll wrap up about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's going to be a great day, a lot of great information, and really it's going to be powerful in that we're going to have folks from across Georgia, from across different communities, speaking with one united voice, saying we don't want any more voter oppression, any more discrimination against Black voters, against Latino voters, AAPI voters. We want fair maps that keep our communities whole and help us speak with a strong voice.
And if anything, it's a great opportunity also to go to the Capitol. I think it's, I had never been to the Capitol. Now I've been a few times. I'm still getting to know. So it's a great opportunity. And it is a building of the people. So people should also, start taking advantage of those things that are not like exclusively for politicians. It's for the people. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's the people's house, and these legislators, they're supposed to work for you. They're supposed to work for us, not the other way around. They need to be accountable to you. And that's, one thing I'll say. I know there's a lot of people out there who say, every cycle, they tell me to vote, I vote, but I don't feel like anything changes. Well, one, your vote is so powerful. That's why it's being attacked by the political elites, by white supremacists in this country, right? And gerrymandering is one of the ways that they try to limit the power of your vote. And so that's why it's so important that we show up in big numbers and as a united front to speak out against gerrymandering and speak out against rigged maps. Because if your prices are high and you want them to go down, you don't want rigged maps. If you want your hospitals to stay open and you want access to healthcare, you don't want rigged maps, right? If you want more dollars coming into your community and investing in the infrastructure that your community needs and wants and is demanding, you don't want rigged maps, right? And so that's why it's so important that we push against these maps because gerrymandering is just one of the terrible tools that are used and have historically been used to weaken communities and dilute the power of our voices and of our votes. And so that's what's at stake, and that's why we need everybody to come together and speak out, whether it's on June 17th, the first day of legislative session, June 22nd, our People Over Maps Day, or any other day of special session.
Thank you. Because along with being informed, I love that you're opening the eyes of the public into how important this issue is. And so some people might be frustrated and like the progress has been lost. What gives you hope in this moment?
I'll say, what gives me hope, one, is that in these tough moments, whether it's the Calais decision, or anything else problematic that we see in the news, is that really, we can agonize or we can organize, right? Those are our options. And, maybe we agonize for a few moments in the initial reaction. But right now, what I see happening is communities coming together throughout the state of Georgia to organize ourselves, to come together and recognize that we have so much more in common than we have that's different between us, and that our interests are common interests, our common cause, if you will, and and we could come together, and we have strength in numbers, and whether they choose to see it or not, these electeds have to be accountable to us, and really, this is the perfect time for us to come together and organize, activate, engage, and take action to make our voices heard. And I really have so much, as I'm seeing, these plans come together, as I'm seeing, 20,000 actions being taken just in the span of a couple weeks, and more actions taken each and every day. The people of Georgia are seeing what's happening. They are ready. They are taking action, and they're not going to let their vote get suppressed, their communities get split apart. Certainly not going to let it happen silently, right? We're not going to go away quietly. So I'm just so excited to see all of our different communities coming together and speaking and acting on it as a united front. And so that's what inspires me, is seeing the people of Georgia get engaged on an issue that really affects just about every facet of our lives. And those biggest pressures, those front of mind pressures, the more we can educate folks that redistricting does have a direct relation to whether a data center comes into your community, whether your hospital stays open, whether your prices go up or down, that's a real world impact. I think we're going to get even more folks engaged, and so that's what's really exciting and what's really inspiring for me.
What I got about all of that is your poetry of you can agonize or you can organize. I'm just saying, it's a poetry moment there.
Yes.
I think we can print that on shirts. That is the new quote. I mean, everything you said is important, but that quote was like, dang, that's a poetry moment there.
Yeah. It's not often I'm that succinct.
Anything else you want to add before we let you go until we see you next month? Because at this point, I just think we're going to see you every month here.
Oh, no, I'm so thankful for opportunities like this to talk to our community. And because, like I said, historically, this has been, an issue, through generations, that has really been used, a weapon that's been used to target Black voters. But in recent cycles and rounds of redistricting, we've seen not just Black voters be targeted, but Latino voters and AAPI voters be targeted. And that's why it's so important for us to take part in intersectional advocacy, to unite as one. And again, like we're all feeling the pressures of lack of access to healthcare, of our prices going up for groceries, for gas, and whatever else. And this is an opportunity not just for us to come together, but to advocate and get a win for all of our communities, for all the people of Georgia. And so that's where I'll leave it. And I'm sure I'll see everyone here soon, and I'll see everybody at the Capitol on June 22nd for People Over Maps Day.
Definitely. This is definitely not a one community issue. This is an everybody issue. So everybody go on June 22nd to the Capitol, and they can definitely see more information on social media, our social media, Common Cause's social media, and hopefully and I think it did, informed a lot of us on this very important issue. So thank you so much for joining us for this section of La Pinche Política, and El Pueblo Unido will be right back. welcome back. Thank you so much again for joining us for this episode of El Pueblo Unido. Once again, Marifer, we are so saddened to see you go, but we are so fortunate to have you as part of the GALEO family. You've guys seen that we've had previous co-host as guests, so you just know that we're going to try to sneak in Marifer in the podcast again. Salma, welcome again to the podcast and to GALEO. I am so happy to have you now as a co-worker, as a friend, and as a co-host. So thank you so much. And you did amazing, by the way. So just a shout out to you. You can stay tuned with everything GALEO by following us on social. So on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X, we are at GALEO org. And on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, we are at I am GALEO. You can also follow our sister organization, GALEO Impact Fund, on all of those same socials with the username at GALEO Impact Fund.
Yes. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, don't forget to join us at our 2026 Ponte las Pilas Summit, taking place on August 29 from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in Lawrenceville. The Junior Achievement Discovery Center at Gwinnett will be hosting us so graciously, and we are selling tickets. So for our listeners who are not able to view the banner on screen, you can buy those tickets at the bit.ly link. So that's bit.ly/capital, all capital, LLS26. So that is bit.ly/LLS26. Hope to see you there. And don't forget, we also have our mixer coming up. So it's for our GIO alumni to reconnect, to meet people from past cohorts, from this cohort. And also, we're going to try something new. If you are interested in joining GIL and want to hear firsthand experience testimonies from our alumni, this would be a good opportunity to join us at our mixer. We'll have a non-alumni ticket sale as well. So I hope to see you there on July 23rd in Chamblee.
Yes, and then just to wrap it up, we want to re-thank all our guests. They were amazing and we learned so much, and we're just happy to have them. Y recuerden, el Pueblo Unido jamás será
vencido. We'll get it right sometime.
That was rough.